Good morning, everyone. My name is Veronika Châtelain, and I want to start off by firstly thanking the organizers and also thanking my co-panelists who are sitting in the front row who will be sharing the stage with me. So, by practice, I am a senior program officer at the Open Society Foundations, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with the organization, Open Society is a global philanthropy centered in advancing equity and human rights through grant-making, advocacy, and various programs. In 2017, there was a resurgence of the restitution movement, which started way before my time, in the 1950s, when Pan-African leaders called for the return of illicitly stolen objects from Western colonizers to return back to their rightful places in Africa. After French President Emmanuel Macron announced that he supported the rapid return of objects looted from Africa during colonialism, many countries, like a domino effect, also followed, and we saw a global call for other Western countries to do the same. So now here's the challenge. Where and how does philanthropy fit into this? Myself, along with some other colleagues, Rudo included, decided to conduct a field study and find the gap areas. And while there are many, many gaps, the one we could best fill was the funding gap for Africans in Africa working on restitution. And by 2021, we are ready to launch what is now known as the Global Initiative for the Restitution of African Heritage. You see, restitution needs cooperation from both ends, the West and Africa. And this includes local communities and nation states. So this initiative, which I'll talk more about a little bit later, was my way of leveling the field, kind of a Robin Hood effect. Backed by Open Society, it would be a 2-year, $10 million investment focused on doing what other organizations who are currently focusing on restitution don't do. It would solely support African-centered and African-led organizations by African individuals seeking to support the return of objects violently and unlawfully taken from the continent. This meant supporting civil society-led restitutions, creatives, artists, scholars, youth-led initiatives, African and European governments, and officials and those working who have innovative and progressive approaches to the field. Now, I know what you're probably all thinking, besides funding, what can philanthropy really do to advance restitution? Well, over the past 2 years, not only have we managed to provide critical funding to the field, but we have also supported the launch of an African Heritage Fellowship, which will launch in this September, led by our partners at the African Institute in the United Arab Emirates. This fellowship will give financial support to 5 African individuals who are focused on the research of heritage, decolonization, restitution, and reparative justice. Provide communication, litigation, tech, and media support to African-led organizations and their diasporas that are working on restitution efforts through artistic practice, research, technology, and policymaking. We have co-created the African Common Position paper, which Rudo was also a part of, on restitution with the African Union. And we have actually invested in tripling their budget for 2024 for culture and art across the continent. We have assisted in the restitution of artifacts from Cameroon, Madagascar, Kenya, and Ghana. We have created AReF, or what is better known as the African Restitution Fund, which in collaboration with our partners at Trust Africa, will continue the work of restitution outside of Open Society Foundations, providing more flexibility and support to African-led initiatives and stakeholders that are working on restitution. This will be launched officially in January of 2025. And finally, we've used our power to convene, which has proven to be our greatest investment to date. Just this past August, actually, I hosted the continent's first ever global convening for the restitution of African heritage at the historic W.E.B. Du Bois Center in Accra, Ghana, which some of the panelists were a part of, where for the first time ever we brought together museum leaders, heads of state, government officials, including bringing together stakeholders seeking restitution from the West, from other countries outside the continent, such as Mongolia, Greece, Australia, Iran, and Iraq. To sit alongside creatives, artists, cultural producers, tribal leaders, civil society, community leaders, all to discuss the ways forward in restitution of African heritage. And while I can go on and on about this, I believe I'll have more time to discuss later on the panel. I want to play a short video which better reflects how philanthropy and our power of convening and financial support has helped advance the field of restitution through the eyes and partners of our grantees. I think we can play the video now.
It was slavery, then colonialism, now new colonialism.
But this initiative by the Open Society Foundation is an important one, as we will contribute to the various efforts on the continent to ensure that African cultural properties are successfully returned to the continent and its rightful owners.
Welcome to Open Society Global Convening for the Restitution of African Cultural Heritage. Heritage is humanity.
90% of Africa's cultural heritage is believed to be located in Europe. It is not just unfair, it is a grave injustice.
Ces œuvres d'art ont drainé beaucoup d'intérêt, nos terres ont drainé beaucoup d'intérêt. Il est grand temps que nous puissions parler de la restitution.
The mindset was very polluted by colonialism, of you not appreciating what is yours. In that sense, there is need for restitution to re-educate our people in that way.
One of the greatest thefts that has ever occurred was a theft of memory.
When I talk about restitution, I'm really interested in the knowledge system and how can bringing back this object refuel our communities with new energy.
Il faut que la jeunesse puisse s'approprier et connaître en tout cas cette question de restitution.
When they're coming home, the conversation that is going on says that we should take them to museums. Museums are the prisons where they've been kept ever since they were taken away from the natural environment. And I think we have to look into connecting the communities and finding out what happens to them.
When the objects, the subjects come back, where will we put them? Where were they before you took them? There were spaces consecrated to these beings as they were created. We have enough space. Just send them back.
This here is a celebration of our heritage. This is for those who refuse to forget, who hold the memory of who we are, where we came from, how far we've come and how far we've got to go. This is for the ones who are committed to community and progress. This is for those who are unrelenting and demanding for restitution.
Restitution is a human rights issue. We have a heritage and we have the right to have access to that heritage. And by providing someone, with access to their heritage, that is a basic human rights, and it interweaves with so many of our other core programs.
For many people, and we've certainly found this at Open Restitution Africa, is as soon as you start talking about it, someone will be like, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. There's so many people with a personal connection and often don't know where to start. More and more the information is available. The more people get connected to it, the more people start to drive their own personal connections with it, the more I think there'll be a massive wave that will be undeniable.
Law and litigation is necessary, but is not sufficient. So we must also look at the role of advocacy, including what I like calling disruptive advocacy, because we don't always have to be nice.
Prior to my work on restitution, I had built a very strong network of partners supporting the work we were doing as an organization. But immediately we started working on restitution. They just looked at us like, oh, that's the rebel. The rebel in her is coming up, The interpretation was the organization inciting violence and maybe pushing for a political uprising. Again, because our approach and strategy was really to uphold our right and our civil duties to be able to push the people in power. Other international organizations that worked with us, everyone backed out. And so we were left on our own. And then Open Society came in to support at a time where if the support didn't come in, it would have crumbled. Because no matter how much resources I have from my full-time job, it can really not be enough to bring in other people. We became more proactive than we were before.
When we talk about restitution, there's 3 areas in that is really important to discuss. One is research, one is documentation, and one is care in the field of conservation.
As we try to recover, we have to have restitution. We also think about what we should preserve, to use that point, so that we don't have this issue coming up again and again and again.
Do we see the debate or the discourse on restitution in school curriculums? Do we see the debate on restitution in galleries and museums? Sometimes we do, but in the foundational spaces of the primary schools, the secondary schools, and the universities, the discourse on restitution should be foundational, because without your cultural bearings, you cannot build a society.
Since getting Open Society Foundation, we've been able to grow a team across 3 countries on the African continent. So within 18 months, we've developed 2 research reports, a podcast on digital restitution, a series of processes towards developing the starter platform, which will launch next year, and a series of explainer video films being developed by a women-only team in Nairobi. So it's just been really catalytic for us to be able to do the work that we need to do.
The work that we are doing now with our project is built on the work that was done 50, 100 years ago, right? And what we are doing now in the present will one day become the past. And therefore we have to be conscious of how we preserve it.
We have been engaged mostly in listening. First of all, to communities on the ground in terms of where these things or beings might go back to. And then also trying to find out what is in Western museums, so we actually know what we're talking about. That's what our inventory project is.
Well, the big goal for the Return of the Icons project is to get the icons home. The circumstances when they're leaving the continent were often traumatic. And of course the diaspora are a key stakeholder in that process. As much as the people in Africa are outraged, we're more outraged because we're there seeing these things. And each of those icons embodies a story, how they were made, the technology involved, the aesthetic sense. All of these are conversations that we can have with our history.
At the end of the day, that this isn't just about a return, but that the return is the start of the journey.
And this topic is one that is extremely important for us because it is about African dignity. Open Society has given about $10 million to institutions, civil society groups, communities, and people working on this issue across the world. But most of this money has gone to Africa. There is also an area where we have done extremely well with our partners, which is in the area of advocacy, in collaboration with the African Union, in collaboration with ECOWAS, but also in collaboration with the communities that our governments serve.
And more profoundly, as W.E.B. Du Bois once said, now is the accepted time. Not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done, and not some future day or future year.
Depuis longtemps, de tout bas on a vu mes grands-parents, et avec eux, leurs brins précieux, qui font de nos jours la beauté de leur musée. Afrique debout, debout comme un seul homme, le seul mot reste, restituer, restituer nos objets d'art, restituer nos objets, restituer nos objets d'art, restituer.
Africa did not die. Africa did not die.